Hey friends, thanks for checking out the video. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're being a force for good in the world. So this video is the first part of a conversation that I had with my good buddy, Al Sullen Sr. Al and his beautiful wife, Deb, have been a part of our spiritual family for a real long time now. Just really grateful for their friendship and their story and their influence on us. So it was kind of a long conversation, so we decided to break it up into maybe two parts. And so this is just the first part, and this video is really a lot about Al Sullen talking about his experience growing up as a black man in the U.S. And I think it's really an important story for us to hear. There's not like a lot of prescriptive points or anything. It's just hearing what it was like for him. He's gone through some amazing things, and I think it's important for us to learn and hear another man's story and experience. So anyways, here is Al Sullen Sr. in what it's like growing up as a black man in the U.S. Love you. I'm sure the world has changed a lot.
The world has changed a lot.
You've even told me just really briefly, and I didn't want us to talk too much before the video, but man, you told me about some of the things that when it comes to just the experience of a black man here in the U.S., how different it was then versus how it is now. Tell us a little bit about that.
I went to all black schools. It was segregated. I was born in 1948. I started high school. I started elementary school in 1954 at 6 years old. So I went to Felina C. Jones School, which was a all black elementary school. I went to Rivers Fredericks, which was at that time it was junior high, not middle school. So junior high school was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Right. 9th grade was included as your high school required courses. Sure. And then I went to Clark High School. So I went to an all black schools. Wow. All the way through to college. Wow. That was prior to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I remember going to stores, and they would have colored bathrooms, white bathrooms, colored water fountains, white water fountains. And I'd ask my mom, I said, why, as a young kid, why do they have that? And she said, that's just the way it is. Wow. Now, my mom and dad had to test to be able to vote.
Stop it.
No, they tested to be my mom and dad voted in the 50s, so they had to test. Wow. Prior to 65 Voting Rights Act.
To prove a certain level of
I guess we were foreigners, you know?
Yeah.
Don't know. Wow. My mom and dad had to test, because I recall my aunts going over the test with my mom, because my dad started voting before my mom. And she had to go in and take a test. Wow. A U.S. citizen had to go in and take a test. Wow. To vote.
Gosh. And you've experienced every season since then, right? So you've experienced all of the changes that happened in the 60s, but you also experienced Dr. King, right? Yeah. And how that probably felt a certain way to you. And for me, I've been so surprised to see maybe how slow the white evangelical church has been to ally maybe with the black man. Have you experienced that?
Our churches was the most segregated place in the United States. The Church of Jesus Christ. And I didn't understand that. I remember one time my dad was a pastor. I remember one time, and the church built the church on our property.
Oh my gosh!
You know, I mean, the church didn't have to pay. As a matter of fact, it's most of the sinners in the little parish gave the most money to build the church.
Wow! Yeah, there you have
and so it was built on out. So the church didn't have to pay the property. Wow. It was free property, and I remember one night we used to go to church on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And Tuesday night was Bible study. Thursday night was, I can't remember what Thursday night was, but we were going to church one night, and the little small town, it was like Barney and Andy Griffin.
Okay.
They had the sheriff and the deputy. So my dad, I think he passed the speed limit was something like 50 miles an hour or 45. So he was doing the speed limit. He passed the deputy sheriff. Deputy sheriff followed us all the way to church.
Wow.
And got out the car and told my dad, you don't pass. You're speeding. My dad said, no, I wasn't. I was doing the speed limit. And so my dad told us, my mom, he said, take them and go to church. And he pulled a gun on my dad. And my dad stood up to him, and my mom was like, oh my goodness. And so the sheriff came. And the sheriff said, hey, Reverend, how you doing? What you doing? God. And my dad told him what happened. He said, oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it.
Wow.
But that instant, you know, that's the first time I saw, whereas my dad could have been shot. And what we see today, law enforcement, and law enforcement is good. I was a part of law enforcement as an adult. We aren't talking about law enforcement. We're talking about the police officer who is not upholding his or her oath. It's not most of law enforcement is good. But it's the police officer who isn't upholding their oath of office. I think I was talking to you before about being in the service. Being in the service, we take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America, regardless of whether or not you're a Republican, Democrat, Christian, atheist, whatever. We have one job, and that job is higher than our individual desires. And that's how the military does it. Military was integrated in 1947. President Truman integrated the services in 1947. Prior to that, the services were segregated. My dad would work at Crimco. It was a dairy company. Boy, we had chocolate. We had all kind of chocolate because he would come home. My dad could not be a foreman there. He was the best worker there. He was the most qualified worker there. The foreman couldn't read or write. My dad could read and write. My dad kept the books for the company. Most of the men there couldn't read and write. My dad finished high school, so he could read and write. And so when the company left, the president of the company wanted my dad to move to Chicago with the company. And he said, you can be a foreman in Chicago, David.
But not here.
But not in New Orleans.
Because you're black.
Yeah. Jim Crow laws. Having the test, that was a Jim. When you hear Jim Crow laws, that was Jim Crow laws. Separate bathrooms, separate restaurants. I could go in a restaurant today and sit and eat. I couldn't go in a restaurant. I had to go to the back. I had to pay the same price, but you had to go to the back. Movie theaters, we had to sit at the top. In the black section. And you wondered, what in the world is going on? You know, the doctor's office, our doctor was a Jewish doctor. He allowed us to walk in the front door of his doctor's office. Certain doctor's offices, you couldn't walk in the front door. You had to walk in the back door.
Wow.
So
it's things for us that I feel like I've only seen that kind of thing in movies.
I lived it.
But it's so amazing. And I remember hearing a black man say that for him, when he experienced the video of George Floyd's death, and the others, that for him, for whatever reason, this one in particular, it felt like a death in the family. And I remember talking with Gail, who is a staff member for us, and when she heard that she felt like, yeah, I felt that same way too. And so the illustration that they used was, I felt like there was a death in the family and that we were having a funeral for a family member and you didn't come, talking to all the people that have just remained silent, haven't, addressed it, haven't done anything. And for me, that really broke my heart, to think that we weren't supportive of people who were going through a grieving process when they had this loss. How did that work for you? How did you experience all of that?
I've seen it since the 50s.
Wow.
It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a surprise to me. And I've seen that type of incident since the 50s and during the 60s.
Wow.
And how my parents told me to approach it was, be respectful to the police regardless. When they stop you, you say, yes, sir, no, sir. Be respectful.
Right.
Don't argue, because as a black man, you can't argue. A white person can argue with police and there won't be a problem. As a black person, you're gonna go to jail.
Wow.
So that's the attitude that I had.
Yeah.
I've been stopped by the police before. And I remembered what my parents said. Just be respectful.
Wow. Yeah.
Treat the person as you want to be treated.
Yeah. And don't you think that for me, and I think it's so important for people like me and people like us to hear that experience. Because I've been pulled over a bunch of times for doing all kinds of stuff, and I mean, my dad had never had any conversation like that. That is not a concern for me. And so just from your perspective, and you've raised a son, you've raised a daughter in this,
I told him the same thing.
Culture, and it's a conversation you had to have with your
That's the
children
conversation
that my
I
parents
had.
did not have to have with me.
That's the conversation I had. Be respectful. You know who you are.
Yeah.
You be respectful, and don't be boisterous. Don't say, well, this.
Yeah.
Just be respectful.
Yeah.
Because what happens is when you push back, you have to look at it from the police point of view, and you have to look at it from the individual's point of view. The police are stopping a person. They don't know what that person has on them. That's first of all. They don't know what that person has.
Yeah.
So when you're calm, what I think, was it this past Tuesday's? Well, you guys have been talking about a calm response.
Right.
When you're calm, it calms a violent situation down.
Yeah. Right.
When you're not calm, it brings it to a boiling point. And something is going to happen.
And so that's something that you have to manage.
You have to, each individual have to manage that.
Right. Well, I mean, you in particular, as a black man, it's something that you have to consider.
I consider it.
That I haven't had to consider. And so for me, one question I have is, to me, that double standard is without a doubt unfair. And so for us moving forward, and I think kind of seizing that opportunity, and I've talked to people that it's, you think, oh, I feel different when I'm pulled over than a white person does. And we think, well, thank God that's not happening anymore. That's wrong. It is still happening.
It still happens.
It is something, you have a son that's on the road all day, every day.
Yeah.
And so you're having to manage that there is that double standard that still exists.
One interesting thing, Alvin came home one day during the Christmas holidays. They have sometimes civilian cars that help them deliver the packages because they have so much. So, and the drivers they'll tell them they're at a certain stop, and so the civilian car will come up to a certain stop, and they'll start unloading packages and put them in the civilian to help the drivers. Right. And so this one white lady pulled up and said, "You guys are stealing from UPS." And my son looked and said, "What kind of UPS uniform on?" And so the other guy had a badge. He was in civilian clothes, but he had a UPS badge. And she said, "Yo." And so my
on
son
video,
said,
getting
video. So my son started taking video of her.
Wow.
So the other guy she said, "Ma'am, this is our procedures."
Yeah.
My son said, "Come on, let's finish this. Don't even address her."
Right.
Okay, when I was growing up, we used to catch the bus everywhere. Bus was 7 cents. Can you realize that? 7 cents. It went up to a dime, and we said, "Good Lord, Jesus." But during that time in the 50s, prior to Rosa Parks refusing to get up, there was a little sign in it that you'd put in the hose, a wooden sign that said colored section. And so the colored section was in the back of the bus. So when a white person would get on and there weren't any more seats, they would take the sign, push it back, and so you would be pushed back further.
Right. Wow.
But a black person couldn't take that sign and move it up.
Wow.
So you sat in the back of the bus. 1957 changed all of that when the bus boycott. No black person rode a bus.
Wow.
The bulk of the bus income was from African Americans.
Wow.
That's what changed.
The money.
When the buses weren't getting any money. That's
when change
happened. And in 1957, you could ride anywhere on the buses.
And I bet there was a lot of white people that weren't happy with that development.
You know what? I don't think I guess there were some, but most people, I guess, were pretty pragmatic and said, "You know what? Hey, whoop-de-doo."
Yeah, okay, good.
I remember the first white lady I sat next to. I was 7 years old. 7? No, 9. I was 9. 1957. I was 9 years old. We got on the bus and my mom just told me sit down, and I sat next to a white lady, and hi.
Wow.
And Jim Crow laws were funny because I don't think the bulk of the citizenry really cared about it. But as human beings, we use whatever to our advantage is. Okay, if I've got that advantage, wow, whoop-de-doo, it's better for me.
Right.
My cousin was one of the first black bus drivers. Prior to 57, prior to the Civil Rights Act of 64, all bus drivers were white. Anyone that worked for the city was white. No black people. My sister was one of the first black telephone operators.
Wow.
And they only picked fair complexion.
So you could be a little black.
Yeah. My sister is a fair complexion. And most of the operators were either Creole or fair complexion.
Wow.
So if you didn't pass the paper bag, have you ever heard of the brown paper bag test?
No.
If you were darker than a paper bag, then you didn't get jobs. That goes back to the house slave and the field slave. The field slave is going to get darker. You go out in that sun, you're gonna get darker.
Yeah.
Most of the people that worked in the houses were fair complexion because they were part of the plantation owners raped their slaves, so they were half of their children. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. Deb knows a portion of her white family because we have ancestry, and so
Oh my
the white
gosh.
side of her family, her and Deb, talk.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. One thing that I've learned in some of this this journey that I'm been on through this is that I am learning to, as a Christ follower, to not always be the man who stands up and has the solution, but instead, I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase, but savior complex, which is the idea of, no problem, I'm a white man who's going to come and I'm going to solve all of your problems, as opposed to, and what I'm learning is working to follow people as they come into their own solutions. And so I'm really in this season where, instead of me prescribing solutions, to come into just this heart of wanting to follow and wanting to learn and wanting to listen to voices that we haven't heard enough, where we've maybe snuffed out, where we've maybe pushed down, even subconsciously or without us knowing it.
You're on the right track, Dave. One thing that we didn't do after the Civil Rights Bill was passed was to listen and talk to people. And we see we have more in common as human beings.
Right.
That when we take this stance that I'm a conservative or you're those liberals.
Right.
We're human beings created in the image of God.
Yeah.
I look at you and everyone as a human being first. See, that's what Christianity is.
Okay, I hate to cut it short, but we knew you didn't want to watch a 1 hour long video. Next video that we're going to do with Al is going to be a lot about talking about current culture, what's going on in the world, how he's perceiving some of the things that are currently happening, as someone who has gone through the things that he's gone through. But thanks for checking it out, and we look forward to talking again soon.